Of the Comhairle, which is being conducted from the council chamber and obviously through Microsoft Teams. Before we start, can we ask all those online if they're hearing us loud and clear?
Yes, can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. And before we begin the formal meeting, can I ask Councillor Johnny McKeever to lead us in prayer, please? Johnny.
Nahad Tanya Efkin Lorich Danams can you get a riach? As in thank you, John Horam, Kanyakir, Talutrok, and Hallow Cruich again. As in Gierig me cooler in Markhorle, as in ye Jespets, Tinka Cogunian, a different cusper and had the Yakin and the Claren Name at Yakin of a show. As in thank you, Gibel Cormac and you be Kanyak, Kakujas in Homer and Yogas at Loin. Agus as in thank you to Sean Huyman ha Kiolch and Oring and Shinianu. As in thank you to Kujak Sean Iatsen had to be Steach in the Hashkin going, you had to gain Corum maybe Cora agus Jespet agus Chin Cogunian ha Hashin Smanich with Cormach agus Kiolch guys and ha Hashin Ruchtach. As in thank you to Sean Lokobrach agus as in Gaharig new thank you to Sean Hansi Estay. Pichit blianne go naar Musk, meester Burr be vaker like jedege warst. As to thank you naar einiges. Get nach Russian uuden in de counter edition Lieberger toward. As je fichen nu, de wel hulkalereine Kormbach of his kielach. Sas in kerk me code scheeniges kasi. Es no berure ha reages kemia keine gegonje as ne blianne en harritjach. As in Kujak Giari Gamu, Coderisha Fedabis Golat, Master Choice, as commissioned the whole Kujak gas and the horses as in the Yaku Rectoshach Gibli. As in thank you on the Bukobrach Gear, but Varonish got count Vari, as Hula Hatcha Attershin. Be Torniash guys and ha Akeri Janu Cogunian Darabek Yamanan, as Gemú gan níon for droch vial agus droch jausi for fagin nach el talitlish na biachken haak. Be chorus en habronig in naim sjo kudach. As ha mora naun as na kuis nach nakin. Be chore is na loch girls na tjalichen agus na carriagenax na loch gobrich. As na lachen dulich darach a harompe. Be chorus en ha volg droch slange. Be try maintain na moig. Der thank you na hay anu gan hin agus fagin yakin an ho hay von laus er begin garit agus. Der thank guys in the hat anu oper viar is na hospital na doctorens na banalterum en hulle den ja go bedas na hospital. Agus as na kois na kudach, anu keintach gebel. Dan je furach as na tein ak heen gefatse soningai. Be korish clown. Sturat. Agus bis ni gerig mi at quadrucht sa chruher an de lachen en noog. Na steek na droch lachen agus merit ni blian. Ik hoor is loch tekers ha quadas in jeeres. Ik tar taik an hulle danje ha geri gachla agus gemi at quadruchtsen. En schon jarst agus schon sture agus gemi at quad di dakel agus. Liebig de dakel agus. De gaudach in de handjen tonight. As niet jullie gemi koera in je nu as a horgan de ganje was zo. Agus gemi maga in je pekenen. Agus as niet jullie shin is gachriest. Amen.
Thank you very much, Councillor McKeever. And just to let you know that the meeting is now being recorded and will be available on the Comhairle's website following the meeting. I am ruling items 2 and 3 as urgent to allow the matters to be considered prior to the next meeting of the Comhairle. I will now ask Derek Mackay, Governance and Elections Manager, to read the sedierant. And those in the chamber, can you please put your light on when he calls your name so that people online will know that you're present. Derek.
Nachgarum.
On the show.
Leader.
And here.
Duncan McInnes, MBE.
An seo.
Ara agus Waterside. Kenneth J. McLean.
Am I seo?
Ian A. McNeil. Usha Jess Eriske agus Benavilia. Ian M. MacLeod.
Am I seo?
Susan Thompson.
Yes, I'm here.
Usha Tua. Mustafa Hussein.
Me sure.
Ushan Robertson. Naherach Paul Finnegan.
Me sure.
Kenneth M. MacLeod.
On the hill.
Skiernan Loch. Robert Mackenzie.
Yeah.
Angus Morrison.
Am I seo?
Skirug agus Carlebach. Ranulph Fraser.
An seo?
Norman MacDonald.
On the hill.
And Tiv Shear agus Nish. John Norman MacLeod.
An the hill.
Donald McSween.
On the hall.
Lochatua. Donald F. Crichton.
On the show.
John A. McKeever.
And me on the hill.
And Colin McLean.
On the hill.
John F. Lochatua. Ian M. Macaulay.
Am I sure?
Malcolm K. MacDonald. Gordon Murray. John F. Jess Ray Mackenzie.
Yeah.
Angus McCormack.
Go.
Dr. Francis Murray.
I'm sure.
George Murray.
Am the hill.
Skieran Rue. Norrie MacDonald.
On the hill.
And Finlay M. Stewart.
On the show.
28 members of the quorum present.
Okay, thank you very much, Derek. We'll now go to the agenda, and the first item on the agenda is declaration of interest. Members are asked to declare any interests they may have in any items on the agenda. It would be helpful if members expressed why they are declaring an interest in the item concerned. Do any members present in the chamber or online have any declarations of interest? Councillor Ushan Robertson.
Thank you, Convener. I'll have to declare an interest in the third of the amendments that have been circulated on the basis that I am Chair of Comhairle Tua that has a memorandum of understanding and a museum based in Comhairle, which is one of the organisations named in the amendment.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Robertson. Okay, Derek. Does anyone else want to declare any interest in any items on the agenda? Anyone online? Okay, so just one declaration of interest. Item 2 on the agenda is the report of the meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee of the 24th of February 2026 at 2 o'clock. The decision report of the Policy and Resources Committee of 24th of February 2026 at 11:30 a.m. has been uploaded to SharePoint. I will now 2 p.m. has been uploaded to SharePoint. I will now ask the leader, Councillor Paul Steele, to present to us the 2026-27 budget as proposed by the Policy and Resources Committee earlier today. Leader.
Thank you very much, Convener. This is the fourth budget of this term of the Comhairle, and therefore my fourth as leader. And before we go further, I would like to thank members who have contributed positively to the budget strategy process, whether at meetings of the Budget and Strategy Board, at budget seminars, in contributing to the member survey on budget choices, or in speaking to me and the Chief Executive with questions on budget preferences. Our process began back in October 2025, and despite this year's Scottish budget being the latest ever, delivered as late as 13th January, our preparation has served us well and has contributed to a thoughtful budget setting process. I think that councils across the country, even those with majority administrations, would continue to be envious of the collegiate way in which we are carrying out our duties, and that is all to all our credit. Today's meeting sees only minor amendments being proposed by members to the main budget we've developed together. We'll be asked to rethink school counselling and children and young people's mental health funding, arts funding, and the level at which we set council tax. They are the only areas that we're not quite in full agreement on, which is pretty impressive. And by the end of today, we'll have reached a position where we'll have set a balanced budget. I would also like to thank the corporate management team and particularly the finance team who have prepared all the supporting documents within the budget folder. This budget is also a first and a last. This is Sandy Gomez's first budget as Chief Financial Officer and Malcolm Burr's last as Chief Executive. I would like to thank them both for their advice and guidance throughout the budget setting process, and for the report recommending a balanced and lawful budget, which once again provides adequate funding for the services on which our communities depend and which allows us to continue to support our communities, delivering our political commitments and aspirations, and which provides the best ever level of Crown Estate funding allocations for community distribution. As I have mentioned, Malcolm Burr's 21st budget will be his last as Chief Executive. Through a challenging period of funding, these 21 budgets have seen us deliver major projects, continue and enhance service delivery, avoid compulsory redundancies, invest in innovation, and maintain the financial security of the Comhairle. As Malcolm steps down from his position, he leaves behind a Comhairle that is financially secure and is united in maintaining and enhancing the delivery of services that matter most to us and our communities. So before I continue, I'd like to thank Malcolm for his work, his support, his advice, and for placing the future of our islands, our Comhairle, and islanders at the heart of strategic, financial, and policy decisions. So thank you, Malcolm. As a Comhairle, we are working across so many areas of important work at the same time as having these budgetary pressures. Our anti-poverty work, our focus on the 6 priority areas of Western Isles renewable energy dividend, housing opportunities and innovation, Gaelic, family-friendly support, connectivity enhancement and climate resilient infrastructure, as well as the community renewal partnership work in Euston Barra, the Pride in Place work in Lewis, and all the major developments that are putting pressure on all our departments and services, planning to roads. And we need to be in a position to support all of that work, and having the appropriate budget lines funded is critical to our success. This budget is the first to come before the Comhairle in my time as leader, which implements what at first sight appears to be a substantial increase in the funding provided through the settlement. As is often the case, an initial sum of 6.2 million reduces to 0.44 million after reductions to take account of local government and teachers' pay awards, directed spend on health and social care, employers' national insurance contributions, and the effects of the floor, which this year has reduced our general revenue grant by around £3 million. This year, therefore, is no different from antecedents in remaining a time of significant pressures on both revenue and particularly capital budgets. And it has to be remembered that the Comhairle is still recovering from the effects of so-called flat cash settlements and from previous council tax freezes. The world economy remains very volatile, with many costs, particularly in construction, continuing to increase beyond the level of UK inflation, with perhaps even less international security than in previous years. It's impossible to predict the cost and availability of commodities and other essential materials, and that is one of the reasons why we have once again recommended retention of £3.5 million of uncommitted balances, approximately 2.8% of our total revenue budget. Of course, it is not only the public sector and government which faces the effects of these costs. The term cost of living crisis would be better now described as a permanent and increasing cost of living, and the question which the Comhairle continues to try its best to answer is, what can we continue to do to support our communities? We look first to protect our communities by protecting frontline services as much as possible, and that is best done with continuing our prudent, measured approach to the realities of the financial situation, and by continuing to employ the necessary number of employees to deliver these services. That is a continuing pressure, as you are all aware, and the Chief Executive has commented on many occasions in terms of both reviews of the organisational structure and employee numbers generally, that we have reached the stage of thus far and no further, if we wish to maintain vital frontline services to the public and also to deliver our policies, strategies and political aspirations. The local government settlement and hence the Comhairle's draft budget is once again for 1 year only, 2026-27. Local government's wish for multi-year budgeting remains as strong as ever, but that appears an even more remote prospect. The Scottish Government has, however, published its spending review for 2026 to 2029 for revenue and to 2030 for capital. And for local government and indeed the wider public sector, it does not make particularly happy reading. The local government share of the national funding cake is set to fall from 26.4% in the current financial year to 24.8% in 28-29. Meanwhile, support for other elements of the public sector in Scotland continues to be maintained and even to increase. It's therefore not surprising that the Accounts Commission for Scotland has publicly and starkly declared that some councils are likely to be financially unviable within the next 3 to 5 years. Our own external auditor confirmed only this month that financial sustainability remains one of the Corlear's significant risks, as if we needed to be told. Wider implications of the spending review on the unsustainability of public services, as they are now delivered, need to be heeded with much more urgency than has been seen up to now. The spending review envisages some £1.5 billion of savings, £1 billion of these to come from health and social care alone, through public service reform and efficiencies. While that is certainly an ambitious and courageous target for government to set, it would require a significant increase in the pace of public sector change across Scotland for that target even to be partly met by 2030. Meanwhile, we do as much as we can to make the most effective use of the resources which we have and support those who need support as best we can. Our cost of living support fund will shortly be open to applications, and we have again been able to allocate the sum of £250,000 to supporting community groups and organisations to support individuals and communities throughout the Western Isles. On Crown Estate funding, we received a welcome and substantial increase in Crown Estate funds of over £600,000 to a total sum of £2.4 million, and Policy and Resources Committee recommended this afternoon the proposed use and allocation of Crown Estate funding, with an increase to £100,000, the highest sum ever awarded to each ward. I'm very pleased to see that the balance in our distribution of Crown Estate funding remains supporting strategic projects, community projects and aspirations, but also, and we have to note that this is unfortunate that Crown Estate funding has to be spent this way, supporting vital statutory and non-statutory service provision, such as evening bus service, community transport, our heritage service and athletes travel. While the financial position and outlook for the Corlear remain as uncertain and challenging as in my last three budget speeches, I'm delighted with the progress which we have made at a strategic level. Since the last budget was set in February 2025, we have moved forward significantly with each of our key corporate policy objectives. The Barra and Battersea Community Campus, our #1 capital project, is now at the stage of planning for delivery, and not just education, leisure and social care elements, which we discussed last year, but the whole package of Corlear, HHP, NHS and Police Scotland, and hopefully UHI also, services and facilities for which the Barra and Battersea community has waited for so long and far too long. In public service reform, we remain at the vanguard of work in this area, and our single authority model is among the detailed proposals currently before Scottish Government and Scottish Ministers for consideration and, we hope, staged implementation. Our single authority model, lest to be forgotten in the midst of all this financial turmoil, is one of our key policy objectives, not just, although it's now essential, to place us on a more secure financial footing, but also to empower our communities, enhance democratic accountability and make the Western Isles, as we were in 1975, a beacon for public service vision, aspirations and, particularly importantly, jobs. So public service reform and our single authority model continue to move at pace, but it will not be long in the lifetime of the new Scottish Parliament that decisions will be required on the path to be followed. Finally, in this abbreviated list of strategic priorities is, of course, the Islands Accelerator model. To those who say that work in government world takes far too long, this process began together with our sister island councils in June 2025 and concluded with an announcement in the Scottish budget in January 2026 of a model which will be outcome-based and supported by revenue which will enable us to secure funding to meet the infrastructure needs of our communities, which again, regrettably, we would not have no prospect of meeting through our ever-diminishing capital programme. Our islands will host some and may in time host many renewable energy developments, and it's both right and appropriate that our people see the tangible benefits of that investment. In addition to the benefits of jobs, opportunities and new experiences, which being part of a national strategy for energy delivering should bring, we have had too many years of being recipients of energy produced elsewhere, and it is right that we should now see the benefits of energy being harnessed in and around our islands. Our work on developing Eilean Siar energy and focusing on our communities benefiting from the renewable energy developments, should they proceed in areas like housing, jobs, cheaper electricity and community benefit funds, will be key to our island's future. Our aspiration is always to provide the best level of services and facilities, and the funding to be provided through the Accelerator model will go a long way to delivering these aspirations. But my primary duty today is to present you a balanced budget. The draft budget before you represents our best efforts to manage our scarce resources in a way which continues to deliver the services on which our communities depend and which, remarkably, still provides sufficient capacity for the Corlear to take forward its own political strategy, policies, community leadership for the Western Isles and our all-important work on public service reform. Renewable energy development, community empowerment, apprenticeships despite the withdrawal of the shared prosperity funding and no award of local growth funding, community and social development and all the other equally important areas which we support, both from our own funds and by the wise use of external funding. In addition to seeking to advance these policy objectives, support community choice and maintain strategic vision, this budget proposes retention of the maximum possible level of reserves at about 4.5 million of general reserves and at around 750,000 of Crown Estate funding. The purpose of reserves is not to retain money for its own sake or vaguely to save for the proverbial rainy day, but to ensure that the Cornea has the capacity to make some choices. Not, of course, the level of choice we'd wish to make, but in financial years 2027-28 and in 28-29, which, as I've noted earlier, the spending review does not promise much. In an age of one-year budgets, we have to do our best to prepare our own multi-year spending plans and to protect our services and communities to the best extent possible. The only way to do that is by maximising retention of available reserves. The pressures on our service budgets are set out in some detail in the presentation of the Crown Estate Funding Report to Policy and Resources Committee earlier today, but these include potentially retention of the vital services previously funded through Shared Prosperity Fund. Also community transport, bus services and potential future support for arts, culture and heritage. Funding might also be needed for supporting our commitment to Gaelic, as Post and Skipping and Gaelic are still funded only on a short-term basis. Winter maintenance is on track to spend up to £200,000 more than budgeted for, while manual placement overspends are predicted to be in the region of £100,000. Combined, those pressures alone equate to £300,000. Coincidentally, the same figure is the difference between a 7.5% and a 9.5% council tax rise. Where do we find that money if we don't have reserves? This budget has been prepared on a realistic basis, reflecting that the pressures of service demand and external factors may require its revision in the course of the financial year. It's important that we remember that we are not looking just at the budget pressures and projections for the Cornea, but also for our share of the Integration Joint Board's budget for 26-27 and future years. The IJB's reserves have lasted slightly longer than anticipated and have been supplemented in some part by additions to NHS budgets, but the reserves are now exhausted, and the choices for the IJB and hence the Cornea and NHS Western Isles are stark. Either anticipated deficit for Cornea delivered services of around £2.8 million is met by service redesign and reduction, or that sum is covered in whole or in part from the Cornea's own resources. The IJB's ongoing deficit represents a significant strategic risk for the Cornea, and adding that £2.8 million deficit on top of the Cornea's own predicted £4.9 million deficit for 27-28 would leave us needing to find £7.7 million, and yet another reason to ensure that we have enough reserves available to balance our budgets in future years. It's incumbent on the IJB to address its financial position urgently. In the days when we could do so, we increased funding to the IJB, recognising our demographic imbalance, and even when we could not provide any addition to the budget, we have fully protected the IJB budget without ever insisting that it look to its own service provision and do what other services have had to do. That time, in my view, is now past, and the IJB must look to reduce its budget commensurate with its anticipated income. At the same time, we will continue to press Scottish Government for provision in the settlement which recognises the critical nature of health and social care services. Our challenging demographic, common to so much in much of rural and island Scotland, and to plan ahead on a more strategic basis for addressing this known and increasing deficit across Scotland. Returning to the Cornea's budget, it is self-evident that even with a modest increase in unallocated spend, without our policy of retention of a reasonable level of reserves, we would have been looking at damaging cuts to our services and potentially a very high increase in council tax. This budget recommends the use of £250,000 of the £4.5 million available balances, leaving us in the best possible position to protect the Cornea, potentially the IJB, and our services and policy choices for 27-28 and beyond. This is a policy which we have followed successfully for many years, and our good financial management and the small increase in the settlement now gives us a real opportunity both to protect and defend our services, and to give ourselves some policy choices in future years. The budget shortfall for next year is predicted to be £4.9 million, and having the level of reserves lower than that shortfall is a precarious position to be in. If our reserves are reduced, when we don't actually need to do that, all that will do is place pressures on ourselves and our services and our communities in the next financial year and beyond, and limit any policy choices we have, or our ability to react to unwelcome changes, such as we have seen with the withdrawal of Shared Prosperity funding. Can I also commend the good work of the corporate management team in identifying yet more savings? CMT graded its savings options as usual as green or amber or red, and it's significant that neither CMT nor members were able to consider most of the amber or any of the red savings, so unpalatable they were to the provision of statutory and non-statutory services, not just to reduce aspects of service, but to remove them entirely. It's significant but right that we have sought to mitigate the effects of potential savings by the use of Crown Estate funding. And I say once again how much better it would be were we able to use that Crown Estate funding, the interest from loans that we have made, and the Islands Cost of Living Fund to allocate to strategic projects, to add to our much needed capital projects, in fact to take forward more of our aspirations for the Western Isles. But instead we have no option but to include these elements in our budget planning. I once again reiterate, in case it's seen as some kind of defeat, that if we believe, as I think we should, that our job is to support and sustain the people of the Western Isles, maintaining our services and the capacity to run them should always be among our highest policy priorities. I suppose that is now time to speak about council tax. None of us wish to raise taxes, but neither do we wish to cut our services or leave the Corley overexposed in future years. We recognised last year that above inflation increases would be required in future years. That is indeed the case, and it is the case in every council chamber across Scotland. Our proposed council tax increase of 9.5% represents an appropriate and proportionate element of the balanced budget, recognising the need to maintain our services and operations while not imposing disproportionate tax burdens on our residents. Capital funding is £5 million and once again does not represent an adequate sum even to maintain the assets we have. We have an amendment in front of us today proposing an increase in council tax of 7.5%. I understand the sentiment to reduce as much as possible. It is very difficult for our community with the cost of living, and it's the reason I asked the Policy and Resources Committee to reduce the healthiest recommendations of our officers of a 9.5% increase to 8.5%. That found favour with the committee, and I hope that acknowledgement and move is supported by the Corley. The effect on our reserves is to reduce it by a further £150,000. Members have heard today how important reserves will be in the future, so we need to be able to support our communities and the services we provide to them. Any proposal to reduce income from council tax ultimately restrict the council's ability to maintain services to help those most in need, and we have to balance that in our considerations. Full council tax reduction is available to those who are unable to pay council tax. But let us be in no doubt, it is by this council retaining some flexibility to do good with what little uncommitted monies we have, which makes all the difference. We all know of real examples of discretionary services which are not otherwise funded and which help people directly and practically. But if reserves are diminished or used up and there's no capacity within the budget, no service can be provided. In conclusion, and I'm sure you're glad we're getting to the end, I'm once again pleased to place before you and to recommend for your approval of a balanced budget based on realistic and prudent financial planning, which balances use of reserves, external funding, council tax and agreed adjustments to service provision, but which does not just look at the year ahead, but the 2 years after that, for which we have a duty to prepare and protect our services and our communities. This balanced budget will sustain the Corley and with it the communities of the Western Isles for a further year, while putting aside sums which we will undoubtedly need in future years. It is the product of much thought, deliberation and hard work by the Budget and Strategy Board members and our officers, and I commend it to you.
Thank you very much, Leader. And can I have a seconder, please, for the Leader's budget?
I second.
Seconded by the Deputy Leader, Councillor Duncan McInnes. There are, as you know, 3 amendments which have been circulated to members, and the first one is proposed by Councillor Mustafa Hussain, seconded by Councillor Ian Archie McNeill, and I will now invite Councillor Hussain to present his amendment. Councillor Hussain.
Thank you very much, Convener. The amendment is that the Corley does not implement the proposed saving of £50,000 in relation to school counselling and children and young people's mental health funding, with the required funding to be met from the Service Pressure Fund, although the amendment states the coastal community, but just to make it clear, it was just a mistake in wording.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Hussain.
Yeah.
Leader and Deputy Leader, are you accepting this amendment? Who's your seconder again? Councillor Ian Archie McNeill. Okay. So, Leader and Deputy Leader, do you accept this amendment?
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Mustafa, for the amendment. I think this is one of the areas that we discussed in our budget survey and budget seminar. It was close at the time. It's been included today as a budget saving option, but I think on the balance of discussions with members that I'm willing to accept that amendment. Both elements, if that's
okay. And
The amendment, yes.
Okay, so the seconders in agreement, so that amendment, item 2 to the budget and council tax setting 2026-27, the amendment from council in the name of Councillor Mustafa Hussain and seconded by Councillor Ian A. McNeill has been carried. Okay, thank you very much. The next one is another amendment. Second amendment is proposed by Councillor Francis Murray, seconded by Councillor Susan Thompson. And I will now invite Councillor Murray to present her amendment. Councillor Francis Murray.
Second part of Mustafa's.
This is the second part of the amendment.
That's that's for the Crown Estate later on,
Yeah.
report later on, isn't it? Yes. Yeah. Okay,
Thank you,
carry
Convener.
on, Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Convener. That the Comhairle agreed to a council tax increase of 7.5% and that the difference between the proposed increase in the budget and council tax setting 2026-27 report of 9.5% is met from uncommitted reserves. B, that the Comhairle agreed to establish a wealth fund to safeguard and strengthen long-term financial resilience, funded from income from renewable energy developments and Crown Estate revenue underspends, and that the Chief Executive submit a report detailing proposed terms of reference for the operation of the wealth fund.
Seconded by
I'm happy to second that, Convener.
Okay, thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor Susan Thompson. As the leader indicated in his budget setting speech for 26-27, the proposal for the council tax increase has been reduced from 9.5 to 8.5%. So can I ask, are the leader and the deputy leader accepting this amendment to the budget and council tax setting for 26-27 to reduce the council tax increase to 7.5%?
Thank you, Convener. For the council tax element, as I say, we've reduced it to 8.5% earlier, so I'm going to stick with that. Members are content. Yeah.
Deputy Leader?
I second that.
Okay. So we will then move to formal debate. Well, the second part of the amendment, I will ask the Chief Executive to come into that one, that the Comhairle agreed to establish a wealth fund. Chief Executive?
Yes, Convener, this is a competent amendment, and I will be happy to submit a report, noting, of course, that any wealth fund is contingent on future developments, but we can, all of these matters, including the criteria, can be addressed within a future report.
Are the leader and deputy leader happy to accept that second part of the amendment?
I'm content with the second part of that amendment.
Leader, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, and the deputy leader has as well. So we will now debate the motion in the name of the leader, Councillor Paul Steele, and seconded by the deputy leader, Councillor Duncan McInnes, and the amendment to the budget and council tax setting in the name of Councillor Francis Murray, and seconded by Councillor Susan Thompson. And the order of the debate is the mover of the motion, who is the leader, then the mover of the amendment, Councillor Murray, and then the seconder of the motion, seconder of the amendment, and then any other member of the Comhairle who wishes to speak can speak in the debate. And then when we close up, there shall right of reply from the mover of the amendment, and then right of reply from the mover of the motion. And just few ground rules: a speech by the mover of a motion or amendment will not be longer than 5 minutes. During a debate, no member shall speak more than once or for longer than 5 minutes. Members will direct their speech to the question being discussed or to a personal explanation or point of order. The chair can give permission for a speaker to speak for an extra 5 minutes. The mover of the motion or the mover of the amendment has a right to reply at the close of the debate on the motion immediately before it is put to the vote. Any member who is replying under Standing Order 48 must only answer previous speakers. They must not introduce any new matters into the debate. So we'll start the debate and I'll ask the leader. So you have 5 minutes, leader.
Thank you very much, convener. I think you've heard enough from me in the last 20 minutes, so I'll try and keep this a bit short. This is a very difficult decision. Setting the council tax anything above inflation, I think, is necessary. In discussion throughout the year, I think as a Corley, there were some people looking for an even higher increase. I think the 9.5% we came to for the papers today were a realistic position in terms of our budget pressures and also what we thought the community would be able to deal with on reflection and on discussions with members and also members of the public. I felt earlier on it was appropriate for us to try and reduce that if we could. I think 8.5% middle ground between the two proposals is a fair place to be. As I said in my speech, we need to be ensuring we're able to actually provide services in the future to the people who will be paying council tax. So I think it's really important that we're protecting that. So, but also recognising the challenges that people are feeling in cost of living crisis. So I'll leave it at that just now.
Thank you very much, Leader. Can I now ask Councillor Francis Murray as the mover of the amendment to speak? Councillor Murray.
Thank you very much, convener. I want to begin by thanking Mr Gomez and his finance team and all the officers for their work in producing this budget, particularly given the timeframes in which they were operating this year following the very late Westminster budget and the knock-on effect on Holyrood. I would like to thank Mr Gomez himself for giving up his time to meet members of the SNP group before we prepared this amendment. I would also like to thank the leader for the open and consultative way he has conducted this whole process and Mr Burr in his last budget. There is absolutely no implied criticism of anyone involved in the process in this amendment. As we know, the setting of the actual level of the council tax is a political decision for those of us who have been elected by our communities, and it is that which we need to address and that which we are answerable for. I believe this amendment would still lead to a balanced and lawful budget, and I think it remains within the spirit of the discussions which were held at Budget Board since October. Put simply, in putting forward this amendment, I am asking for a rebalancing of the relative amounts on the two sides of the scale of council tax revenue and the use of reserves. Given the current position in which many people in our communities find themselves, I feel that the weighting towards council tax in a 9.5 or even an 8.5, although that reduction is welcome, is imbalanced. It may only be, and I'm talking here about the 9.5 because I haven't had time to do the sums, it may only have been the equivalent of £2.53 per week at a band D, the 9.5 increase, but that's equivalent to £131 a year, which is not an insubstantial amount when taken in conjunction with the likes of fuel prices and food inflation, which people are contending with in an ongoing cost of living crisis. I would completely discount the argument of imagining ourselves in a league table of council tax rises as any kind of comfort to council taxpayers. I, in my previous existence, developed a healthy disregard for league tables. You can go up as well as down. Being third lowest in terms of increase last year in Scotland does not pay this year's bills. And incidentally, if we're going to be boasting about being third lowest one year, if we're third highest the following, I don't think it's a particularly good look. But I do want to make it clear that this is in no way a frivolous or ill thought out amendment. I refer back to the original Budget Board suggestion that between £750,000 and £1 million would be available from reserves. In the event, if it was 9.5 that was been put forward, less than 300,000 was being used from reserves. Even if we go to 8.5, as has been suggested, that's 450,000, far less than the 750 to £1 million that was initially suggested. So what I am proposing in this amendment then stays well within the original parameters and is therefore both affordable and pragmatic. We have heard both this morning and this afternoon that reserves are infinite and that we need to prepare for coming years. I contend that this amendment does not call recklessly on using reserves. I'm not asking for anything beyond what was originally suggested at the Budget Board. And has been accepted, the amendment also looked at beginning a process of proactive planning for the future, acknowledging that we are awaiting a brighter future, courtesy of energy which we have available. So before I close, I was very pleased to see the emphasis in both the Leader's comments and a recent press release about council tax relief. It is really important that the most vulnerable in our community are protected, and I believe something like 1,700 households in the Western Isles are already in receipt of such relief. Everyone eligible should be aware of their entitlements, and I think that's a really important point. However, whether the proposal is 9.5% rise or 8.5% rise, the people that the pressure is on are the people just above that threshold of receiving relief. And I think that we can afford to go to 7.5%. I reference again the fact that we were planning to use more reserves originally. I think that would provide a little bit of relief to hard-pressed people in our communities, and I would therefore move this amendment.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Murray. I will now ask the seconder of the motion, who is the Deputy Leader, Councillor Duncan McInnes, to speak.
Thank you, Convener. I see this year we're coming to the same position really that we've been over the last 4 years, discussing whether we're going to use reserves, because once we use reserves, they are lost forever. And as Councillor Murray said, those that are most in need and most vulnerable do have access to council tax relief. And looking at the papers in front of us, 20% of those in category A have access to that. And the council has made very clear, and the leader, when he did respond publicly to that, he made it aware that the council officers are in place for assisting those that are most vulnerable during this current crisis. And I think one of the things we have to look at from a Scottish Government point of view ourselves is the benchmark that they have provided to water and sewage rates, which we as a Comhairle collect on behalf of Scottish Water, and they set that benchmark at 8.7%. So every householder in the Western Isles will be paying an additional 8.7 on water and sewage, which has been set by Scottish Government. So with moving to 8.5, we are just slightly below what the Scottish Government benchmark has been for water and sewage. And looking at water and sewage, and when you're looking at that, it's far easier to make projections on what the costs are going to be. But when we're looking at the council and the overall number of services that they do provide over a year, it's far more difficult to project that. And as we heard earlier on, there are very significant risks of additional expenditure coming your way, with the bus contract coming up in the autumn time. The financial inclusion officers that we do have, and we've just given them a short-term contract. So they are very, very significant within our community. And the excellent service that our training department have done with provision of apprenticeship schemes, that's under threat. And as Comhairle, the HR subcommittee have extended contracts, not for a year, but short-term contracts. And we wish for all those jobs to be maintained. And we have seen recently the additional cost that has come to the Comhairle with mainland placement, people that have to go to the mainland placement, and that can hit us very, very quickly, and we need reserves for that. And looking back at the Comhairle, I think year on year we have to be very mindful of
the wisdom that has guided the Comhairle to this stage and the prudent and pragmatic approach they have taken to make sure that the minimum reserves are maintained, because reserves are used or applied in Scottish Government as well, and they can have up to 700 million of reserves within their own budget. So when we're talking about 3.5 million, I think it's prudent and a pragmatic approach to make sure that we do budget for the future. And the Scottish Government spending review is stark in relation to the public sector and councils in particular, when we're seeing that it's 26.4 for this current year and reducing to 24.8 in 28 and 29. And when we're viewing the IJB that we've heard, you know, reserves are exhausted there with the additional 2.8 million that could come before us in the next financial year. I think it would be not good management of financial resources to increase, to reduce to 7.5, and that's why I would recommend and back the leader that we should maintain the 8.5 that we put forward at the Policy and Resources Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McInnes. Now ask the seconder of the amendment, Councillor Susan Thompson, to say her words. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Convener. This amendment is not opposition for opposition's sake, but rather to offer a balanced and carefully considered amendment to the proposed budget. Over recent weeks, we asked our communities for their views. Their message was clear. Households are under real pressure. People understand the financial challenges facing the Comhairle, but they have also asked fairly, in my view, for a more equitable settlement, one that shares the burden rather than placing it too heavily on families already stretched. Our amendment reflects exactly that. It's costed, responsible, and rooted in the voices of the public who responded to our survey. A 7.5% increase still provides essential revenue, but it does so while recognising the reality facing households across our islands. This is not simply about rejecting the albeit improved proposal before us. It is about improving it further, listening, adjusting, and ensuring our decisions reflect both fiscal responsibility and social justice. And I urge members to support this amendment and show that we are willing to meet our communities halfway. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. Does any other member want to come in and say anything during the debate, or will we go to the right to reply of the mover of the amendment and the right to reply of the mover of the motion? Councillor Ray McKenzie.
Thank you, Convener. It's interesting that at least the leader, thank you for taking it down from 9.5 to 8.5, and the amendment's going for 7.5. I would have gone much lower, quite frankly, but I support the amendment in this case. I feel the public will not accept, and despite what's been said about so many houses, so many families are out with having to pay the council tax. There are many who have, and as Councillor Francis said, that there's a lot of people who are just over that limit, and they're going to find themselves in difficulty. Now, 7.5%, 8.5%, it's a lot to many people over the year. And I certainly support the lower figure in this case. As I say, there's always a line where people will have to pay. And some talk about this being the area of highest poverty and having the highest poverty figures. But then they expect people to pay what was going to be 9.5, it's now 8.5 or 7.5. So they would be hypocritical
to talk about poverty and then, go for a higher figure. 1% of council tax is 150,000 approximately. We're sitting on £8 million of reserves. We're not sitting on 1 million, 2 million, or 3.5 million. We're sitting on £8 million of reserves. We have agreed earlier to put aside 3.5 million for the future and so forth. But there still leaves 4.5 million on top of that. The 3.5 million of balanced reserves earlier agreed, but the 4.5 million is, to quote, usable reserves to support the budget process. Well, if this isn't supporting the budget process, I don't know. We're still not even topping the million figure. We're only talking about 500,000 or whatever. So I'll just say thank you for bringing it down so far, but I hope by the end you'll be bringing it down a wee bit more. Thanks for that, Convener.
Thank you very much, Councillor McKenzie. Does anyone else want to come in and say something? Councillor Carl McLean.
Thanks, Convener. Yes, I support this 7.5. I support it on the grounds, first of all, as Councillor Thompson said, we're looking at households which are under pressure. To equate the increase with the water and sewage, which is going to run at 8.7, which we have no control over, but that is an 8.7 additional to a household's income. And as already pointed out, we're looking at what is called the middle earners. We've agreed that there's help for those unable to pay the council tax, but we're looking at those middle earners who go out at 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, and they're taking home a pay. And that pay isn't huge, but it's big enough to take them over the threshold. And therefore, they're caught in this. Inflation, national inflation is running at 3.2% or thereabouts. Island inflation is a wee bit higher. And we're looking at an increase of 8.5%. I think 7.5, as already pointed out, is not a reckless use of resource at all, as has been pointed out. I would say it's a very balanced use of resources at the time when households are struggling, particularly, as I pointed out, these middle earners. And I think that we need to, certainly in our community, where they are facing high bills, energy bills, probably the highest in the country, and yet we're in here and we're talking about increasing to 8.5%, and thankfully it came down from 9.5%. I know that Mrs. Murray doesn't look at like tables, but I'll look at just two equivalents. One is Shetland. Their increase is 7.3%. Argyll and Bute is 6% increase. And I'm just saying that, so therefore, I'm just looking at these two. Not looking at anybody else. I'm not looking at the mainland. I could say Glasgow, 5%. So I think that going up to even to 8.5% is, even I would agree, even at 7.5%, but we've been prudent by going to 7.5 rather than reckless. And I don't think it's a reckless increase, a decrease at all. And I would certainly vote for the 7.5%.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor McLean. Anyone else want to speak? Councillor Macaulay.
Thanks, Chair. I'm sitting here wondering to myself why 8.5 was muted about an hour ago at the previous meeting when 7.5 has been on the table for almost a week, as well as been spoken about in the budget meetings. I note that there was partly due to discussion with councillors and members of the public. Well, I don't honestly know what members of the public said, yes, I want 8.5 instead of 7.5. We have reserves. We know we have reserves. Today, we learned that from the Crown Estate, there's going to be an additional 756,000 and that's going to be put aside for Service Pressures Fund. So the money is there. It would be wrong of us, I feel, to not support 7.5 over 8.5. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Macaulay. Councillor Donald Crichton.
Thank you, Convener. I just want to turn to the subject of reserves. And we're going to need every single penny of the reserves up until the end of this decade, where there's forecast to be a decrease, significant decrease in the funding that we receive from the Scottish Government. So I think we should continue to act prudently as we have over the last decade as a council, managing our finances and using our reserves prudently to mitigate some of the worst choices that we have to face. In terms of the council tax, if I'm not mistaken, council tax came out in the public survey as being something that the public would favour in terms of helping us tackle the financial situation that we have. And it is the only mechanism open to us as a democratically elected authority to raise revenue, something that was denied to us for over a decade with the iniquitous council tax freeze. Think of the revenue that we could have raised in that decade to tackle some of the spending cuts that we had to face during that time. So I think this is a small incremental rise that will be accepted by the public, I believe, to help us tackle the situation that we are in, a situation that is going to continue, as I said, up until the end of this decade and past that probably. So I would support the 8.5 rise that has been recommended, and I think it will be complement the recommendations that we have put forward in terms of the savings that we have made and also the Crown Estate money that we are using to assist us produce a balanced budget.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Crichton. Anyone else want to come in? Councillor Lonnie MacDonald.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to follow it with Councillor Francis Murray. I quite get on with Francis. But she made this the point earlier on that this was a political decision. I think it's more of a fiscal decision. It becomes political because we've had, in my 9 years in here, had to deal with well, just ruinous settlements from the government in Edinburgh. And every time we've had to deal with this ruinous settlement, the only way we can attempt to balance the budget is by increasing the council tax. And guess who opposes the increase to the council tax every single year? Well, it's the party who are in government in Holyrood. So, I mean, that's the issue we're facing here. It's almost like, with one hand, we know where the money's coming from or not coming from, and then on the other hand, the party that's given us less money is opposing us putting our council tax up to mitigate the differences. Now, this has been 9 years of this in my lifetime as a councillor. I noticed Councillor Murray quoted Band D. 77% of our houses in the Western Isles are between Band A and Band C, and that's £1.69 and £2.25 a week at the 9.5% increase. So at the 8.5% increase, it's going to be slightly less. Yes, nobody wants to pass on burdensome increases and cost of living increases to anybody who's in hardship. That's obviously not the case. We don't want to see it either. But at some point, we're tossing around 1% here on 150k as if it was just confetti, and we're talking about taking money from Crown Estate, which gets hammered every time as well. We need to be cognizant of what 150,000k can do across many different budgets that we're asked to cut, we're asked to look at, we're asked to investigate. We're talking about reserves. I don't know where Ray gets his £8 million from. I'm led to believe that we've got £3.5 million of useful reserves that we're playing with. And we've got 4 years just now, and things are going to get worse next year, the year after, and the year after that. So we're not replenishing our reserves. We're not in any position to do anything about putting anything back into reserves for 4 to 5 years. And we've got worse times ahead. How? I don't know. Are we legally obligated to keep a minimum amount of reserves? Maybe the chief executive could answer that. But we're heading down towards a serious black hole. I fully agree with a wealth fund being created, but we have no legal framework to extricate any finances from any of the developers that are coming here to generate electricity. So whilst I would love to see us taking money in from that particular avenue, we're going to have to, I don't know what tools we have at our disposal to find that or to levy money from these people. So building a wealth fund is a great aspiration. It's not that.
Sorry, Councillor MacDonald, we're on about the council.
Yeah, so I mean, all I can say in closing is the difference between 7.5%, 8.5%, 9.5%, that 150k will make a difference somewhere. And I propose we go for the 8.5. It's a decent compromise and I support it.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald. Anyone else want to come in? Councillor Angus McCormack.
Thank you very much indeed, Convener. I too wish to err on the side of caution in terms of expenditures from the council. There is a suggestion that we balance out the difference between 7.5 and 8.5 from our uncommitted balances. But if you look at the next amendment, you'll see that that same suggestion is made there. Uncommitted balances are not there just to be poached so that people can get their own way with regard to one suggestion or other. They are there to look after eventualities about which we do not know or about which we might guess at the moment might be a problem in the future. And the points that were mentioned by the deputy leader, there are 3 posts related to poverty issues that are currently hanging in the balance. And I would like these posts to be filled in the future. At the moment, there is no funding for these posts. And I'm hoping that ultimately there will be. But that might have to come from our balances. It has, Councillor MacDonald is quite correct. In past years, the SNP group has always suggested that we should spend our balances. But in past years, this council has always been very prudent and hung on to its balances because it knew it was likely to need them in the future. I think I'm very conscious of the fact that I don't want to raise council tax. And the reason we are raising council tax is because we haven't received sufficient monies in our budget, from the Scottish Government. That is the basic reason for why we're having to raise council tax. And I have discussed this with many people prior to this meeting in the public. They accept that we are in a difficult situation and they accept that there will be a need to raise council tax to a certain extent. I think 8.5 is a reasonable compromise to make, and I would like to support that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCormack. Does anyone else want to come in? Councillor John Norman MacLeod. Sorry, John Norman.
All right, thank you, Convener. Just to say, I'm not really particularly interested in all the politics that goes on with council tax setting and all that. I have to think of the people of the Western Isles, and Cavan touched on it earlier, Councillor McLean. Basically, you've got the high earner who can afford the council tax. You've got the low earner who doesn't need to pay the council tax. Again, we're going to the middle earner. And it doesn't sound a lot, £1 whatever per week, but you've got to remember that's a monthly outgoing that goes on. So with that, I'd be in favour of the 7.5.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor John Norman MacLeod. Anyone else want to come in? Anyone online? Okay, we then go to the right of the reply, and first is the mover of the amendment and then the mover of the motion. So I'll ask Councillor Francis Murray as the mover of the amendment to give the right to reply. Councillor Murray.
Thank you very much, Convener. I'm not going to go exhaustively through all the points made in the debate. We could all hear them. I would want to say that I'm not talking about throwing around 150,000 like confetti. This is well within the parameters that were originally set by the very budget board that has been referenced throughout today's debate meeting from back in October. 750,000 to up to $1 million was put aside, was mentioned from the beginning of our discussions as being available to support the deficit. And that was balanced with the council tax increase. I've asked you to imagine a set of scales with these revenues from council tax on one side and the reserves on the other. And I don't think that at the moment there is enough in the reserves pan of the scales. The public in their responses did indeed say they would be willing to pay a greater council tax. I don't think it wasn't measured how much they were willing to say, but it's also notable that they were far more, almost double the number of people wanted to see reserves being used. When I mentioned political, I was not talking party politics. I was using the word political with a small p, meaning those of us that are not officials but are elected members, whatever political party you belong to. And I think those who have spoken in favour of this amendment go way beyond one political party. It's not unusual that this one political party may be putting forward amendments because there isn't another group of people who are not independents who represent a political party. So that's hardly unusual that the SNP group have sat together and discussed putting in amendments. But I quoted Band D because, again, that was the figures I had in front of me. I'm aware that a lot of houses in the Western Isles do not fall into these bands, but that was just by means of illustration. I agree we need to keep onto our hold of our reserves. I agree we need to be prudent and we need to be pragmatic. I think what the amendment that Councillor Thompson and I have put forward manages to fall on both sides of that argument. It is pragmatic, it is prudent. We're not talking about anything reckless. We're not talking about going beyond what was originally in the budget board presentations. I would urge you to support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murray, and I'll now ask the leader, Councillor Paul Steele, who has the right to reply as the mover of the motion. Councillor Steele.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Convener, and thanks also to Councillor Murray for her considered amendment, her kind words, and also her involvement in the entire budget setting process. It's been really useful to have different viewpoints coming forward, and that's where we came to a position today to have this budget in front of us. As I said in my speech, we only have a couple of areas that we need to discuss and try and come to a position on. This is one of them. I'll try and go through some of the points that were raised. The pressure is on those just above the threshold, absolutely. I think you were talking to my auntie because she was telling me exactly that as well, Callum. It's very difficult. You know, it is the decision we have to make as a Comhairle. Inflation at 3%, and it isn't a reckless use of resources. I think you're right there. I think, to me, the balance of 8.5% is slightly better than 7.5%. Some people might have slightly different views. So, as Norrie touched on as he started, there is no need for us to fall out about this. I think it's just a decision we have to decide on whether we want to be more prudent or less prudent. That's pretty much where we are in terms of this. I could say that the £150,000 difference could fund the posts that Angus mentioned. We could see we're increasing the council tax to fund posts specifically. We've not done that in the past, but that money would go towards supporting the likes of financial inclusion officers whose funding's been cut from the Shared Prosperity Fund by the UK government. So if that's the kind of messaging that we have to put across, then maybe it is, but that's where we are in terms of the budget we have in front of us. There is a cumulative effect of not taking the increase. As Councillor MacLeod pointed out to me yesterday, if we'd stuck with the 9.5, that would have been extra 300,000 a year in 10 years. That's 3 million. So we have to be considerate of all these factors going forward. Again, when we're looking at potentially 7.7 million, if we include the IJB, in terms of having to find those figures next year because of a budget shortfall, and we only have 4.9 million or 4.5 in our reserves, we're in a very precarious position. So to my mind, I think we need to be trying to get as much as we can. That's why I proposed 8.5%. I appreciate the feedback when Councillor Macaulay mentioned earlier on where was I getting it from. I was getting it from members. I was considering again the budget survey and also the representations that were made to me in person and in emails. So that was the reason I shifted slightly. I didn't think I could quite go to 7.5, which is why I went for 8.5. Corac's absolutely not interested in politics. I'm here as an independent. That's what I'm interested in. I don't think I need to say much more than that. I think everything was covered in the debate. Our position is quite clear. We're trying to be as prudent as we can. There is an amendment, slightly less prudent. It's up to members to make that decision. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Leader. So we now go to the vote, which will be a roll call if everyone's quite happy with that. And so remind you again, motion or amendment, the motion in the name of the Leader, Councillor Paul Steele, seconded by the Deputy Leader, Councillor Duncan McInnes, and amendment in the name of Councillor Francis Murray, seconded by Councillor Susan Thompson. So I'll ask Derek Mackay to read out the names. So I hope everyone's quite clear, either motion or amendment. Okay.
Okay. Nachkaram.
Motion.
Leader.
Motion.
Duncan McInnes, MBE.
Motion.
Kenneth J. McLean.
Amendment.
Ian A. McNeill.
Amendment.
Ian M. MacLeod. Susan Thompson.
Amendment.
Mustafa Hussain.
Motion.
Ushchan Robertson.
Motion.
Paul Finnegan.
Can someone put their light off so that Councillor Finnegan can put his on?
Motion.
Kenneth M. MacLeod.
Motion.
Robert Mackenzie.
Motion.
Angus Morrison.
Motion.
Ranald Fraser. Norman MacDonald.
Sorry, can you just wait till your name is called to put your light on? Because the last two, no one online would have heard. So can you just put your light on when your name is called, rather than putting your light on 2 minutes beforehand and not allowing others, people online to hear. So can you shout out again, Councillor Fraser and Councillor MacDonald, was?
Okay, Councillor Fraser.
Amendment.
Councillor Norman MacDonald.
Amendment.
John Norman MacLeod.
Amendment.
Donald McSween.
Amendment.
Donald Crichton.
Motion.
John A. McKeever.
Amendment.
Colin McLean.
Amendment.
Ian M. Macaulay.
Amendment.
Malcolm K. MacDonald. Not there. Gordon Murray.
Amendment.
Ray Mackenzie.
Amendment.
Angus McCormack.
Motion.
Dr. Francis Murray.
Amendment.
George Murray. Sorry, Councillor George Murray.
Sorry, motion.
Norrie MacDonald.
Motion.
Finlay Stewart.
Motion.
It's 15 for the motion, 13 for the amendment.
Okay, thank you very much, Derek. Okay. The third amendment is proposed by Councillor Gordon Murray and seconded by Councillor Ray Mackenzie, and I will now invite Councillor Murray to present his amendment. Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thank you, Convener. We wish to just put the first part of the amendment forward, given that the second part has already been discussed.
Yes, that's fine, Councillor Murray. Yeah.
Okay. So the amendment is that the CORLA, in recognition of the overwhelming public support to protect arts, culture and heritage services as expressed in the 27 budget survey reinstates dedicated creative industries revenue funding of 109,145 for 26-27 for the following arts, culture and heritage organisations: Hebridean Celtic Festival, Eilean Siar Festival, Ceolas, Fashion, Tai Kersava and Launtar. The funding previously approved for 25-26 to be met from uncommitted reserves of 4.5 million to support the budget setting process. In doing so, the CORLA reaffirms its commitment to supporting the arts and the significant cultural and economic benefits which they bring to communities across the Western Isles.
I think you meant the budget for 26-27 rather than 25-26. With support from
I second that.
Okay, Councillor Ray Mackenzie. So you've heard the motion in front of us. Leader, are you accepting this motion? This amendment, sorry.
No.
Okay. The seconder.
No.
Seconded by Councillor Duncan McInnes. Again, we go to a debate, and I don't need to tell you a second time the order of debate. So the mover of the motion, which is the leader, Councillor Paul Steele.
Thank you very much, Convener. Again, I'll try not to say too much. In terms of this amendment, I think we've covered at the Crown Estate Revenue report that was presented to Policy and Resources Committee earlier on. Maintaining and actually increasing support for creative industries up to £110,000 was the recommendation earlier, which we'd agreed to. So that was the reason why I didn't accept this amendment, because we've already made a decision and a way of supporting the creative sector. I think the results of the survey were really useful. The engagement from the community in terms of feedback was fantastic. I mean, the arts element, but also the fact that it fed into everything else that we were looking at. We were looking at the council tax and all the other areas. So it was really useful to have that level of support. So I thank everyone who responded to the survey. The arts did come out clear, and I think in terms of what we've done, like I said, last year we supported the creative industries and the organisations mentioned by Councillor Murray to a tune of £71,000 from the Crown Estate funds. This year we're proposing £110,000 from the Crown Estate funds. The slight difference is it isn't going just to these organisations. We're opening it up. We're allowing other creative industries, creative groups and bodies to be able to apply for this funding as well. I think just in terms of the discussion we've had today, this pressure on all our service budgets is very difficult, and I appreciate, I mean, in Launtar, I suppose, we were the most high profile in terms of the responses, and their staffing situation, they're saying they might have to reconsider and look at it. This is the world we're living in. Unfortunately, with the council, we're having to make these same decisions. There's an opportunity for them to bid into this fund, so they may not have to make these decisions. There could be, through this fund, a way for them to meet their needs, and also to, most importantly, have the outcomes that our community desire. And like I say, I think as a Cornwall, we've appreciated and shown the fact that we are supportive of the creative industries. The proposal that was agreed earlier on at Crown Estate highlights that. So again, I commend the budget.
Okay, thank you very much, Leader. I'll now ask the mover of the amendment, Councillor Gordon Murray, to speak. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Convener, and I'd just first of all like to say a big thank you to the members of the public that have turned out and taken the time to be here today in inclement weather to see how we deliberate and how we do our business. So yes, I'm moving the amendment in my name, seconded by my colleague, Councillor Ray Mackenzie. So this isn't just about the 109,145. This is about whether we, as a council, still believe that the unique culture of these islands is worth protecting, or whether we are prepared to watch it slip away quietly year by year. The public told us loud and clear in the budget survey, protecting arts, culture and heritage was their #1 priority, 45% of respondents.
And that is not a whisper, that is a shout from the communities we were elected to serve. So looking at what these organisations actually deliver for our children and young people especially. So looking at it through the prism of a family. So An Launter alone last year worked with over 2,000 school children, nursery, primary and secondary, delivering creative learning, Gaelic, literacy, well-being and expressive arts that schools themselves no longer have the capacity to provide. This is not a nice extra. That is curriculum for excellence in action on the ground. The Fashion reaches hundreds more young people every year, teaching them to sing, play, dance and speak Gaelic, passing on the living language to the next generation. Ceolas brings world-class tuition and cultural immersion to young musicians and learners in Uist. Tai Kursava runs hands-on heritage and arts workshops for school groups from across the islands. And the Hebridean Celtic Festival gives our teenagers and young adults their first taste of performing on big stages, building confidence, aspiration and pride in who they are. So these are not nice to have. This is an investment in the future of our young people, one of the most important investments we will ever make. So the arts and culture of the Hebrides are not generic, they are unique. Our Gaelic language, our storytelling, our music, our visual art shaped by sea and sky. This is who we are. And once we let the organisations that sustain it shrink or disappear, we do not get them back. We lose them forever. I'm sure this council agrees with me that the arts are not a luxury. They are a necessity, a measure of society's self-esteem and its confidence in its own future. So today, we have a chance to show that confidence. So I know the council have acknowledged the economic value the arts bring in, the tourism value, the jobs, the leverage. Yet these organisations are going to be left to chase competitive funds with more forms, more uncertainty and more bureaucracy. These organisations already do so much with so little. They employ local people, they bring visitors who spend money in our shops and hotels, they fill the gaps in education and mental health that statutory services cannot reach. They do not need another layer of red tape, they need stability. So 109,000 from reserves that currently stand at 4.5 million and more, that is not reckless, that is responsible. It is using one-off money to protect something that generates value every single year. When future generations look back at this meeting, they will not remember the exact figures in the saving plan. They will remember whether we chose to protect the heritage and culture of these islands or whether we let it fade. So I urge every councillor to support this amendment. And I thank every member of the public here today. Your presence tells us that the people of the Western Isles still believe in their culture. Let us stand with them. So I move the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gordon Murray. Can I now ask the seconder of the motion, the Deputy Leader, Councillor Duncan McInnes, to speak, please?
Thank you, Convener. Just following on from what the Leader was saying, we've been discussing, the arts budget for the last three years, and it was clear that the Comhairle made a decision, to have an exit strategy, and that was shifted over to funding coming over the last number of years from Crown Estate. And as the Leader did say, there's 110,000 that is there. So the funding is still available. It's just that the methodology that is used is going to be different on how it is going to be distributed. And as we heard earlier at Policy and Resources, it will give an opportunity of some of the smaller organisations to bid in for funding. So we're not deserting in any way arts, culture and Gaelic. And I must stress, that there are other funding options that are available through organisations, through community-led local development, of which many organisations bid into it, and that fits the criteria. And Bord na Gaelic, when we make reference to Bord na Gaelic, they are very much there for assisting any development with young children and assisting with speaking the language. And as a Comhairle, you know, we have promotion of Gaelic within our own corporate strategy, and we go very much along with a Gaelic first policy in the Comhairle here. And the Comhairle has strengthened its Gaelic team, and that's evident with when we're looking at Gaelic and the promotion of that, with a study currently being done to have a look at the feasibility of having a Gaelic secondary school in the Western Isles, and we expect that to be fed back to us as a Comhairle at our next series of meetings. So with that, I would say that the 110k that we do have is fully respectful of the arts and Gaelic culture in the Western Isles, and as a Comhairle will be looking, and that was in the policy and resources paper, of putting in place a system where people can apply for that funding, and there will be a decision made on the eligibility criteria. And I certainly move that we don't accept the amendment.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Duncan McInnes. I now ask Councillor Ray McKenzie as the seconder of the amendment to speak, please. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Convener. There's not much more I can add to what Councillor Gordon Murray has said. I think he's pretty eloquently put the case. I would just add one thing, that it has been quoted, and it was confirmed today at PNR, that funds can be bid into the fund that will be set up. But that doesn't count this, just purely the 6 organisations. Obviously, it could be individuals, it could be other organisations. So what this amendment actually tries to do is to confirm that there will be funds there for these 6 organisations, without taking away from the paragraph 6.1 in the PNR report, which leaves the way open for others to bid for funds. And there are many others probably throughout the communities that could go for that £110,000. So I support this proposal, this amendment, on the benefit of protecting the 6 communities that we supported in the past. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor McKenzie. Does anyone else want to speak before we ask for a... Okay, Councillor Macaulay.
Thanks, Chair. It's become clear to me that we can't have both. There's the creative industries revenue funding and the new one that we've had, the Creative and Cultural Industries Fund. And what I know has been happening is a lot of work has been going on to make sure as one door was closing, albeit slowly over the last 3 years, that another door was opening. And I think that new door is going to offer more flexibility, more opportunity for organisations and festivals, even more opportunity for youngsters who are maybe looking for tutoring or breaking into this industry to have access to money. So with that, I would go with a motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Macaulay. Councillor Kenneth MacLeod-Harris.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, these are all well established and organisations that have played a part in retaining and promoting the culture and heritage of the islands, and I'm supportive of each and every one of them, but I have to remember that they're also only part of the organisations that support our culture and our heritage throughout the Western Isles, and to just put our funding for half a dozen of these organisations, rather, which is only a small percentage of the number of organisations. There's about 30 communities at least that I can think of that are out there, all looking to do the same. And I think the council's position of providing a fund that is open to any organisation to bid for and is able to provide concrete evidence of what they're doing and also results that are there for the benefit, I think is more important. And so I'm fully supportive of the motion as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor MacLeod. Councillor Kenneth McLean online.
Hi there, thanks. Similar to a comment I made earlier when talking about the abattoir, I find it difficult to support things like this when we're cutting posts to the likes of education. You know, I'm just looking at some of the cuts here. We're cutting a post to support deaf and blind kids. If we're okay cutting something like that, then something like this has to be looked at. We're making hard decisions. They have to make hard decisions too. You know, my conscience just wouldn't allow me to support something like this. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor McLean. Councillor Donald McSween.
Thank you. I have been of mixed opinion about this for a while, but I think earlier on today when we were talking about the abattoir and I spoke in support of supporting that, and some of the points that were made at that time were in relation to how the abattoir and general crofting support and how crofting is part of our culture and of our way of life. Arts and heritage are a very important part of that as well. And also thinking with the Royal National Mud here in 2027, I think that morally I would have to support the amendment in this case.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor McSween. Councillor Nanny MacDonald.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm finding myself in a unique position. For myself and Gordon have been on complete agreement. I agree with every word he said, and I think he was deserving of his round of applause. But I don't support his amendment. And I'll tell you why I don't support his amendment, because we found a route to help more organisations than we have previously. I would have been banging on the door, Gordon, trust me, if this hadn't found a resolution in some form or another. I would have driven down to South Euston and I would have had Paul Steele by the short and curlies somewhere along the line. But I spoke to Paul about it. I said, what are we going to do about this? You know, because I think it's incumbent upon every single one of us to support the arts and the culture that sustains us as a community. You know, and for anybody to think that we don't pay cognizance to the fact that we have a vibrant community and our culture is what brings people to our islands and supports ourselves as well. You know, they don't get what it is we are as councillors. We care about our community, we care about the arts, we care about our culture, we care about all of these things. And Lavender was never in any danger of closing. And I think that was possibly what triggered an awful lot of emotion around the discussion about culture and the arts. We would never have let that happen. I can't see a situation ever where if something as humongous as the one they're having to close was ever put in front of us, we wouldn't find a solution at some way or another. But when I was told we'd found 110k and we were going to do something that all these organisations could bid into and support, that silenced me. I said to myself, well, we've done something, we've sorted that out quickly, and it was done remarkably quickly. I can assure the public that most of our fears were allayed pretty quickly about culture and the art getting supported, and hopefully most of the organisations that Gordon mentioned will be able to bid into, and we can support them going forward. So I was relieved. I wasn't surprised, but I was very relieved to have discovered there was a solution very quickly proposed by the leadership of the Comhairle and the officers, and I will support the motion.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Angus McCormack. Sorry, who's got the light on? Councillor Angus McCormack.
Thank you very much indeed, Convener. There are one or two facts that we need to bear in mind when we talk about arts funding. The first of these is that the Scottish Government does not give us any money for arts funding. That is something that we have to find from our own resources. And we have found money for arts funding every year that I've been on this council, significant sums of money for arts funding. However, because of the reduction in funding from central government, we have had to look again at how we fund the arts. And I think 3 years ago, we indicated that we were going to have to pull back a bit in the way that we've been funding the arts. We never ever said we weren't going to fund the arts. We have always funded the arts. We have always supported the arts. And we have found a way again this year in which to support the arts. And I'm very pleased that we have found a way forward, because I must admit I was very concerned that we wouldn't be able to find a way forward. And so I am very pleased. It's an area that's absolutely critical and crucial to what we do in our islands. And the notion that this council has not supported the arts is a nonsense, quite frankly. And it makes me quite angry when people make that suggestion. Had I, for example, prior to these meetings, started a campaign to support more funding for social care in the Western Isles, I am absolutely confident I would have got a huge support for that. And I would congratulate the lads on their initiative. It was very well run campaign, and they got a lot of support. Naturally, they got a lot of support. But, you know, we have so many things that we have to deal with in this council. We're trying to hold all sorts of things, balls thrown up in the air, trying to catch them all and answer everybody's problems. And I think we've found a solution here that is satisfactory, and it doesn't involve us and have another go at our uncommitted reserves. I just don't like this idea of tackling uncommitted reserves. So I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McCormack. Councillor John Crichton.
Thank you, Convener. I think it's really important to note that Comhairle has a really proud record of supporting the creative sector over the last 50 years. And were it not for that support, a lot of the organisations that are listed here would not exist. So I think we have to acknowledge that, and that listening to Mr. Murray, you think we were wanting to throw the creative sector into the waste paper bin of history. But we are supportive, and I think we found a mechanism now that we can move forward with to support these organisations. This is not bolt out of the blue. These organisations knew through the dialogue we had with them that we would come into this position. A lot of them prepared for that, others did not, and we're in the situation we are today. But I think the establishment of this fund, this alternative fund, will provide, as Mr. Macaulay said, more opportunity for other organisations in the community to bid into it. And I think it reinforces our commitment to the creative sector, and I would support the motion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Crichton. Councillor John Norman MacLeod.
Thank you, Convener. Just maybe a question, you know, more than a sort of statement. People have to bid into this fund. I mean, you know, like groups have to bid in for the money. Is that not going to filter down where some groups will get very little and will not be able to sort of not perform, but sort of participate or take part or whatever? Is that possible? You know, if there's too many groups, because Councillor MacLeod mentioned Comhairle applying for funding and all that. There's a lot of Comhairle about it. I think you mentioned 30. Yeah, so if you take all that into the funding, and there's not going to be much left, really. So with me, well, I'm into my culture and heritage and the crofting, etc., and I would support the amendment for that reason, because I don't think some of these groups are going to get very much if too many people apply. Thank you.
Yeah, since our debate, Councillor MacLeod, and since you asked a question, I'll Or the officer will come back to you. I think we'll stick to the debate. Councillor Mustafa Hussain.
Thank you very much, convener. And I think I just want to echo, I think quite a lot of things that's been said about culture being the blood of these islands and the work that the call has done in all these years to support culture, to support the heritage and to support all these organizations. But I think it was mentioned in one of the debates that I think restricting the funding to some just few organizations because they've been there first, I think we need to, it's good to open up. It's good to open up the opportunity for other organizations. I think Councillor MacLeod mentioned there is about 30 communities around the Western Isles. So I think in the debate earlier on in PNR, we're talking about maybe young individuals that want to start some initiatives, piping or music or, you know, so I think just restricting the debate to just a few named organization. And I think Gordon Murray mentioned forgot to mention EDF, Ilinduracha Festival, in his praise. So that's 1 point missed from me. So, so I support. Okay, thanks very much.
Stop arguing, Mr. Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Colin McLean.
So, yeah, I support this amendment and on two grounds. One, yeah, some members said that you can have one, but you can't have two. I would say that the two are complementary. And I'm glad that John Norman MacLeod brought up this. As he said, we've got a creative cultural industries fund, and which amounts to 110,000. If 30 Comhairle put in for it, there would be pretty little to go around. So we are expanding our help to the arts and creative and heritage by this motion here, and I think it's a good motion. It's coming. I know again it's coming from reserves, but again the same argument that we had for the 7.5% would be said here. It's not a reckless use of reserves. Indeed, I would say it was a good use of reserves for this purpose, and I do feel that we could have the two, and actually it would show more and more that we are indeed helping the arts and creative and cultural industries. Because I know speaking to one who was involved in the fashion, even as late as last night, there's a lot of people who give off their time voluntary for this. They're not altogether paid. And this person was doing it, and she said she's on a shoestring doing the fashion that she's doing. So there is good work going on in our communities, and I do think that this amendment would support that work.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor McLean. Anyone else want to come in? If not, I'll ask the mover of the amendment first to give a right of reply, and then the right of reply from the mover of the motion before we go to the vote. So, Councillor Gordon Murray, as the mover of the amendment, you have a right of reply.
Thank you, convener. I've listened very carefully to the debate, and I'd like to apologise to Councillor Hussain. Of course, CDF does excellent work, a great festival, and so I respect, you know, the genuine pressure we all feel, but you know, we're using a little bit of a breathing space to protect something that delivers value every single year. You know, to call that irresponsible is to say that the culture and heritage of the islands is less important than a spreadsheet line. So I reject that absolutely. These organisations already spend weeks every year chasing Creative Scotland, Board na Gaelic and HIE. Adding another competitive pot run by this council with uncertain criteria and no guarantee of success is not efficiency. It's more uncertainty, more admin, more sleepless nights for people who are already delivering many school workshops, Gaelic classes, recovery programmes and major festivals. And as has been mentioned, on shoestring budgets, volunteers mostly. So these are the very organisations that the Outer Hebrides economic strategy say are economic assets. And Lantern itself employs 34 local people and brings thousands of visitors. Tai Cursova, Hebridean Celtic Festival, Keolis, Fashion, EDF, they lever in far more than we give them. So I don't think the arts and culture of the Hebrides, they're not a luxury to be trimmed when times are tight. And again, talking from a perspective, from a family perspective, this money is almost like an investment in our children's creativity and in our community's confidence and in our island's future self-esteem. There was a famous quote I read last night about the arts. The arts are not a luxury, they are a necessity, a measure of the maturity and wisdom of a nation. So today, councillors, we measure ourselves. I urge every councillor to vote with the public, vote with the future and support the amendment. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murray. I'll now ask the mover of the motion, who was the council leader, Councillor Paul Steele, to give his right of reply before we go to the formal vote. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Convener. I also urge members to vote with the public who want us to protect the arts, and that is with the creative funding that we've put in place for the Crown Estate revenues, and not to draw on reserves to put in place the suggestion from Councillor Murray. He asked, is it worth protecting or watching it slip away, losing them forever? That's not what we're discussing here. We are offering support to the wider sector. There's more to the creative sector than just the 6 organisations mentioned by Councillor Murray. None of the areas Councillor Murray suggests would be lost. There is funding available for them to be bid into. Thanks also to members of the public for coming along. I appreciate their involvement in the survey, but also for coming along today, and also for their applause for Councillor Murray. It shows their desire and support for the arts sector. I don't know if they would have applauded Councillor Murray when he agreed 3 years ago to remove this from the budget line, the same as everyone else did, or last year when he agreed to fund it from the Crown Estate funds, which he also did. So, in terms of response to the comments that were made by other councillors, Councillor McSween supporting the mods, absolutely. We're doing that in the Crown Estate report as well. So we are doing that. So this is extra funding that they could also bid into that we're proposing. The money that Councillor Murray is suggesting isn't. That would go to those 6 organisations. In terms of Councillor MacDonald, support for Lantern. We responded to an open letter to Lantern. We've promoted the following benefits accruing to the organisation because of support by the Cornea. 300,000 towards the Island Centre of Creative Ageing, led by Lantern, working across the island, supporting community wellbeing through creative practice. Partners in 2 other revenue work streams in the island's growth deal, totalling £700,000. £1.55 million of capital funding to Lantern for developing a creative hub. So we are supporting Lantern, we are supporting the arts. That's a fact. In terms of Councillor MacLeod, there won't be much money left if the other organisations bid into it. They won't be able to apply for anything if we go with the amendment, because it will only go to those 6 organisations. So the other arts groups and people in the creative sector won't be able to apply into any arts funding if we focus on those 6. I think I've made my point. So I look forward to people supporting my motion. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Leader. We will now go to the vote, and the motion is in the name of the Council Leader, Councillor Paul Steele, and seconded by Councillor Deputy Leader, Councillor Duncan McInnes, and the amendment is in the name of Councillor Gordon Murray and seconded by Councillor Ray McKenzie. So I hope everyone's clear. You either go for the motion or the amendment. And again, can I ask members just to put your light on when your name is called, not 2 minutes beforehand, because you cause a traffic jam. And some people online will not be able to hear. So just once your name is called, just put your light on, not before then.
Got him.
Motion.
Leader.
Motion.
Duncan McInnes, MBE.
Motion.
Kenneth J. McLean.
Motion.
Ian A. McNeill.
Motion.
Ian M. MacLeod.
Motion.
Susan Thompson,
Amendment.
Mustafa Hussain,
Motion.
Houston Robertson declared an interest. Paul Finnegan,
Motion.
Kenneth M. MacLeod,
Motion.
Robert Mackenzie,
Motion.
Angus Morrison,
Motion.
Ranald Fraser,
Amendment.
Norman MacDonald,
Amendment.
John Norman MacLeod,
Amendment.
Donald McSween,
Amendment.
Donald F. Crichton,
Motion.
John A. McKeever,
Amendment.
Colin McLean,
Amendment.
Ian M. Macaulay, Macaulay,
Motion.
Gordon Murray,
Amendment.
Ray Mackenzie,
Amendment.
Angus McCormack,
Motion.
Dr. Francis Murray,
Amendment.
George Murray,
Motion.
Norrie MacDonald,
Motion.
and Finlay Stewart.
Motion.
It's 17 for the motion, 10 for the amendment.
Okay, thank you very much, Derek. So the motion has been carried. Okay then. So thank you all for taking part in these debates. Very good debates, very good point made, from both sides. So we still got one more item on the agenda. That's the committee decision report, Policy and Resources Committee from earlier today at 2 o'clock. And it's a committee decision report of the Policy and Resources Committee of 24th February 2026 at 2 o'clock. This has been uploaded to SharePoint. The decision report details a recommendation in respect of the Crown Estate Revenue Round 7 distribution report. And there's also an amendment to the ward funding in the name of Councillor Mustafa Hussain and seconded by Councillor Ian A. McNeill, an amendment to the Crown Estate Revenues Round 7 distribution. And can I ask Councillor Hussain to read out your amendment, please? Okay, sorry, I jumped the gun there. So, the leader committee decision report, are you?
Yeah, I move the committee decision report. Yeah.
And seconded by?
Yes, I second that.
And are you quite happy to accept the recommendation to the Crown Estate Revenues? The amendment, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if Councillor Hussain wants to read it, but.
Can you read it out, please, Councillor Hussain, so that everyone's quite clear?
Thank you very much, Convener. The caller agreed to increase the ward initiative funding from 3,000 to 5,000 per elected member, with the required funding met from the service pressure fund, and the elected members be permitted to carry forward 1,000 uncommitted ward initiative funding in any financial year.
Okay, leader.
Yeah, I'm willing to accept that.
Okay. With seconded by the deputy leader.
I second the leader.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much. That's great then. That amendment has been carried in terms of the Crown Estates Revenue Round 7 distribution report. And that brings the meeting to a close. Thank you all for your attendance in person and online. And the next scheduled meeting of the Comhairle will be on the 1st of April 2026. So, tapal